Hey, everybody. Nice to meet you all. Obviously, we've crossed paths many times on LinkedIn and everywhere else, but I'm going to get right into it instead of giving you an annoying 5-minute spiel about who I am and what I do and all that crap. Um, the first thing I really want to ask everybody is the following question. Okay, why are you here? Right? And it's a question that I kind of want you guys to think about as we go along with this webinar. I have an idea as to why you're here. I'm going to give you my perception as to why I think some of you folks are here. It's mostly because we've had conversations. You might have viewed my content. You might have, resonated with something that I said or seen a comment. A lot of you have engaged in, direct messaging conversations with me before, right? Which eventually led to me saying, "Hey, by the way, I've got this webinar. If you're interested, I'll send you the invitation." And voila, here you are. But the reason I want you guys to think about that question is because what we're going to go over today is a way for you to get the exact same reaction for the people that you're targeting, for your business, for your newsletter, right? For your service, whatever it is. Whatever got you here is the kind of stuff that I want to try and help teach you guys today. Okay. So part of that is obviously having a great personal brand. I focus mostly on LinkedIn, so that's what we're going to go over today. We're going to do a profile optimization webinar with a couple of other things. But to have a really successful, social media account doesn't have to be LinkedIn. Any social media account. Okay, you really have to have three good solid elements. And those elements are one, a really good profile. Okay, that's the first thing. That's your landing page. People don't realize this, but you may have your own website, but unless you're a massive website, chances are very likely your social media pages generate more traffic than whatever your homepage is, like mine, like natberman.com. Clearly, my LinkedIn account gets more traffic than that. The second thing that you're going to want to do, obviously, is create a very sound content strategy. That's quite important. And then the last thing is an engagement strategy. Most social media platforms, including LinkedIn, you're not really going to get very far unless you're engaging with other people. I know that sounds kind of obvious, but a lot of people have historically thought to themselves, if you post it, they will come. Wrong. It's only getting harder. More and more people are signing up, more and more people are creating content, and more content is looking the same, which presents both problems and opportunities. So, without further ado, basically, what I'm going to go through today is how to create a very effective profile on LinkedIn. And to do that, I'm going to share my screen. We're going to go over the five main elements of your LinkedIn profile that you really want to be strong and representative of who you are and what product or service that you have. And then we are going to go over just a little bit. I'm going to give you an overview of a content strategy as well as your engagement strategy. I'm also going to pitch you my product or service because why wouldn't I do that? But don't worry, we're talking about 95% good information that you guys can take with you for as long as you live. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to share my screen here. And by the way, you guys are also going to get a recording of all this. So you'll have it for whenever you want to reference it. All right, let's see. So I'd like to think I don't have a big ego, but I am going to use my profile for this. So I apologize, but it's pretty easy to follow. So let's just get right into it. And there's a couple of updates that have actually been going on in LinkedIn that I do want to bring to your attention as I go over a couple of these things as well. So, all right, five key elements to a LinkedIn profile. You got your banner, right? You got your tagline, you got your CTA, your call to action. You've got your featured section and you've got your about section. Okay. A lot of people have services sections. I'm not a fan of services sections only because of real estate, meaning if you have a services section and a featured section, it can be redundant. So I'm not necessarily against the services section, but It doesn't give you as much optionality as a featured section where you can have, descriptions like this and automatically once you click on it, it goes directly to your website. And I don't explain the difference between all those things. So let's start from the very beginning, okay? Your banner. First thing I would tell you, it probably makes sense to get it professionally done. It's worth it. The prices range from 150 bucks all the way up to 1,000 bucks, right? You could probably get a really good profile banner done for, 350 bucks or something like that. In my community, it's only 150. Uh-oh, first sales thing. Sorry, sorry, sorry. Okay. Here's what you really need in a banner. You see a lot of banners out there that might have like a picture of nature or a bunch of business buildings or like a river or something like that. I'm not saying that's wrong, right? But depending on what your goal is on this particular platform, if you're not telling people who you are and what you do, that's going to work against you if you just have kind of like a plain mural, all right? Um, and something that people don't realize is that the average view time for a banner is anywhere between 7 and 8 seconds, which on the internet is like an eternity. So it's really your best piece of real estate, mobile and desktop, okay? So you want to make sure that you have something professionally done that explains who you are, what you do, how you help people, maybe even an outcome. Also, some kind of CTA if possible. You don't have to get everything in there, but I'll explain mine. So, right from the get go, you know that I have a logo, brand built right there. You don't have to do that. I just happen to have it because I like to have it everywhere and I like our logo. But the main things, the main elements here are your first, entry point is what exactly do you do? Well, here I'm already advertising the fact that you get the right attention, right? People need attention, but they need the right attention. And what is it that I do? Get your brand built. Okay. Once you get your brand built, then you'll be able to lead the conversation. You'll be able to what? A result. Grow your business. How do you do that? Well, the first step, check out my free webinar. So it all flows. All right. So you really want to explain to people, like I said, what you do, what their outcomes need to be, and maybe some sort of a way for them to contact you, join a newsletter, check out a webinar, or whatever it might be. So that's your banner. I suggest an image of yourself. It's helpful, it's personable. And then when it comes to your actual profile picture, while I'm not quite smiling, cheek to cheek here, it does help to have a warm look. You don't really want like a mugshot. Okay. You do kind of want to be inviting. I hate to get all aesthetic on you here, but at the same time, it is more inviting if you have kind of a smile than if you don't. So I'll just put that out there. Um, so the second thing that you want to have is a good tagline. Now, a tagline is kind of like an extension of your banner. There's a couple of different kinds of taglines you can use. You can use taglines that are memorable and they almost sound like, punch phrases, right? Something catchy. Mine used to be the business coach who actually runs a business, right? That was a very memorable tagline. But I decided to get a little bit more specific with the audience that I serve, which is creating impactful personal brands for founders. It's very hard to not know something about what I do from this line right here. I mean, personal branding right there. Founders, that means I'm implying entrepreneurs, possibly leaders, CEOs, things like that. And creating impactful personal brands. That's a pretty powerful statement right there. On the flip side, you can also have a more functional type of a tagline. Functional meaning something that gets a little bit more specific and into the nitty gritty of what you do. A lot of people like to use the word help. I help founders of accounting firms grow their clients by 10% a week through a personalized system generated to draw attention, right? I mean, that's like crazy, but you know, If you have something pretty specific and you serve a pretty specific audience, you might want to get pretty specific in your tagline. At the same time, you don't want to be too specific. You don't want to say, you know, I help lawyers in a town that has 50 people, rock personal brands. You don't have much of an audience. So when you want to think about your actual demographic and the people you're going after, you want it to be specific enough that you're known for something, but also large enough that you probably aren't going to run out of potential prospects. Okay. So there's nothing wrong with saying, you know, I'm the financial advisor for lawyers. Like that's cool. You specialize in doing financial advising work for attorneys, right? That's specific, but it's also general enough where there's enough attorneys out there that you can get business. Whereas if you're saying I help attorneys in, Port Washington, New York, with their finances, okay, then you're limited to only attorneys in Port Washington, New York. I grew up there. So you really want to think about that when you're doing your tagline. Okay, let's go over a third element. And there's a couple things I need to mention about this. So if you notice on mine, I have a CTA that is basically a hyperlink. Okay. And that is called, it's it's called a CTA, but it's part of the custom button function in LinkedIn. Now, I just want to let you guys know this. You cannot have one of these unless you have a, I believe it's a premium business account or a sales navigator account. This is fairly new. This is like as of, I think, a few weeks ago. So I'm going to take you through both options. Okay. There's this option, which, like I said, you have to have that access in order to have this, or you'll add what's called a custom button right here, custom button. Now, I personally prefer the hyperlink. And the reason is this: you have a little bit more flexibility with it, meaning you can create your own sentence. You can put, little icons in there. Personally, if this had the ability to be read, that would be freaking awesome. Obviously, LinkedIn's not going to do that because they don't want people necessarily clicking out and going somewhere else. But your CTA is going to be the following. Where do you want people to go? And what do you want people to do? A lot of people think, oh, I'll just send them my website. Okay, why? Why? If you are a high ticket, provider and you're offering a service, a program that's thousands of dollars a month, why would you send them to your website? Why wouldn't you send them to directly set up an appointment with you? Right? So there's something to be said there. Whatever your goal is, that's what you want your CTA to be. So for me, my entire goal to start relationships with people, or at least augment them, is this webinar right here. You're going to get to know who I am. You're going to know my style. You're going to kind of get a sense like, all right, is this guy worth, working with or following or whatever? Whereas the higher the ticket you go, the more you really want to have a one-to-one conversation with people. But there's also nothing wrong with pointing them to a newsletter. There's nothing wrong with pointing them to a lead magnet. There's nothing wrong with any of that. It all depends on what your goal is and how quickly you want to reach it. I usually tend to think that the lower the ticket you are, the less personal and time intensive you want to be, right? So if it's a a newsletter, it's really all you need. You just want to point them to your newsletter, and then you can basically talk, think about different kinds of text alterations that you want to use, what kind of copy might draw people in. For me, I just tend to be straight up attend my free live webinar. That's it. Unfortunately, you only get 40 characters. Now, you also want to do the exact same thing if you don't have this option. Okay. The reason I like this option is because it stands out just a little bit, right? When you add a custom button, it's just going to look like another one of these, unfortunately. It just blends in way too much. But look, if you don't have that option, then use the button. And the button will usually say visit website, book an appointment. You choose whichever one you want, and then you take them to that link. So you got two choices here on your CTAs, depending on what you want to do with your LinkedIn membership. Okay. Now, we're going to get into the about section last. Let's talk about the featured section. All right. Featured section, this is how I want you to think about it. A featured section is your second chance. When they scroll down, if they don't care about this button, they don't care about your CTA, if they're scrolling down, maybe they'll care about one of your graphics here, right? And that's your featured section. And they might actually click on one of those. My suggestion on the featured section is 2 items max. 2 items max. Okay. I used to only have 1 item. If you just care about one thing, like, hey, I need to get appointments here, then that's it. Just do appointments, right? What's nice about the featured section is that you have a visual and textual opportunity to draw in the user just a little bit more. Okay. And then there's a couple of things that I want to hit on as well. So I'll just give you an example of typically how you would create one of these. Now, what you also want is the exact same link as up here. Don't mess around and give people all these different options like, oh, check out my website here. Here's my newsletter. Here's my this. Here's my that. Remember, you have one specific goal here, and that's to take that person to whatever place you want to take them. So don't give them a million different options. Not to mention, they're not going to take a million different options. Chances are they're going to click on one of these, if any. Okay. So in the feature section, you have the opportunity, like I said, to do 2 things. You get to have a visual representation and you get to have some copy. So it's a little bit more detail. So if you want to create one, you would add a link. You click add a link. And let's just say how we're taking people to, my 30-minute assessment or whatever, which that doesn't even exist anymore, but let's just hit add. All right. Now what will happen is it's going to auto populate for you. So whatever thumbnail is wherever it is, it's going to auto populate. But what's nice is you can create your own. Okay. So you create your own thumbnail. So on mine, don't worry, I'll go back to this. I created a thumbnail. Attend my free webinar, build not just your brand, build your business, right? So you would just add that in there. All right, there's my join brand built. Again, that's auto-populated. You can always edit that. Now, here's another cool thing. Your title is going to be your copy. Let me repeat that. Your title is going to be your copy. Okay. And you're going to not want to have a description. And I'm going to explain exactly why. So your title, make it interesting. Make it something that's, alluring, attractive, specific. In mine, it's basically book your slot to my free webinar. And I explain what that webinar is about. I'm creating a profile that speaks to your audience, right? Here's my newsletter. I call it the Calm Income Playbook, and just a little description of what it is. Build quiet, lucrative income streams online or off without the stress. Now, remember when I mentioned the description part? I'll show you one more time. See that description? Leave it empty. I'm going to tell you why. Watch what happens when I click this. What does it do? It goes directly there. It takes me right there. Okay. If you have a description, and I am not picking on anybody specific, I just happen to know, I'm pretty sure. Let's take a look here. Yeah. I know she's got a couple things in her featured section. Okay. See this description here? Watch what happens. Uh-oh. What just happened? A pop-up. And the only way you can get to that website is by clicking view. That's the only way to get there. Some people aren't savvy enough and they won't do it and they'll never get there, right? So when you have a description in there, it will bring up a pop-up instead of going directly to the place you want them to go. Remember what I was talking about before, guys. The internet lives in seconds, if not milliseconds. So every single click counts. Every single little minute detail counts. All right. So the last thing I want to go over is the about section. And then we'll also do a very brief, overview on content and engagement. Okay. So the about section. What is the about section? I need a sip of water. The about section is what I consider to be your ultimate LinkedIn post. Think of it that way. If you had one LinkedIn post to describe who you are, what you do, how you help people in a detailed way, what would you write? What would you put in there, right? And you follow the same elements that you would follow on any other piece of content. Start off with a strong hook. My hook is I never wanted a boss, ever. That's something that a lot of people can relate to, whether they have bosses or not. I just know that it draws attention. It also happens to be exactly how I've always felt for my entire life. So it was helpful. Following your hook, you want to tell a story. You don't necessarily want to go right into what you do. Okay. A lot of people, they'll copy their profile from like a website or something and it reads very much like a resume or, it'll show their biography or something like that. Nothing wrong with doing that. It's just not going to differentiate you very much. Instead, you might want to tell your story, right? So I talked about my own progression throughout my career and how I didn't like working for a boss and how I wound up being an entrepreneur and how it led to what I do now. So, however you get there, you're going to want to tell that story and you're going to want to format it nicely so it's visibly easy to read and pleasing to the eyes, right? But eventually it led to, so what do I do now? Now I do one thing, help people leverage their personal brand to grow their business, attract clients, and grow their networks. And then if you want, you don't have to do this, but I used a method in which I help people do that, which is ISE, I call it ICE. Identify, strategize, and execute. That's kind of like my thing. Um, and then if someone is interested in learning more information about you, what do? You provide websites, right? You provide the same stuff as here. You see this recurring theme, guys? You never want to stray from the consistency of keeping your links consistent. So there's the place to join my community, and there's my newsletter. All right. And those are the 5 elements of a LinkedIn profile. Okay. Um, does anyone have any questions on the profile? I'm going to do a quick Q&A now if you have any questions, and then I can do a quick, uh, you know, I can do a quick tutorial on content and engagement. If anyone has any questions right now, go right ahead. You can either just shout them out or raise your hand, which is under, where is it? It's under reactions, I think, and you can like raise your hand. Does anybody have any questions?
Not, how you doing? Eric here.
Hey, what's
Nice
up,
to meet
Eric?
you.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, one, any of these features you're talking about, I'm assuming most of them you can do without the premium version. Is there one in particular that you need to have, the premium version or the navigator? Other
Yeah,
than you mentioned the new change that in the webinar link that you have there.
yeah. I'm not 100% sure, but I do not know if you can have a featured section unless you have premium. My personal opinion is that if you want to grow an account on LinkedIn and you want to get business from LinkedIn, premium should be your minimum. Premium
Gotcha.
really should be your minimum. I don't believe you, like I said, the only other one that I'm aware of that you know, have to have a certain type of account is that CTA that we discussed before. But everything else, I think you're good to go. As long as you have
All right.
premium. As long as you have premium. Yep.
Yep. Thank you.
You got it. Anyone else?
Hey, Nat, I just missed that pop-up thing. You said, hey, if you do a description, a pop-up comes. I missed that.
Oh, okay. So watch what happens when I click on this. When I click on this, it takes me directly to that page. See? Right to Calendly. Whereas some people have a featured section, and on that featured section, they will add a description. And I'm going to show you what happens. When you have a description in there, and you click on that, it's going to generate a pop-up. And the only way you can get to her site is by clicking view. So you had to take an extra step.
Got it.
Okay, cool. So as opposed to on mine, right? I don't have a description. You click on it. What does it do? It takes you right there. Takes you right to my site. There's my site. Okay. So these are the little things that make a big difference. You know what I mean? They do make a big difference. And I know you're at Google, so you know you know the importance of all that stuff. Look, I've owned websites for the last 20 years, so when you're talking about click-throughs and milliseconds, it counts. So anyway, Rishi,
Yeah, Nat, thanks for the for this amazing session.
sure,
Learned a lot.
cool.
So I want to I the featured section is where I have put client testimonials, case studies, and all that.
Hmm.
So do we need to have social proof in there, or you should have just a CTA to what we need from the client? So
Yep, good question.
I'm a bit con
A lot of people do this. They'll put in posts and they'll put in testimonials. And I got one word for you: redundant. Okay.
yeah,
Your testimonials are really set for the bottom. Are they really, really crazy important? I have testimonials. Yes, they're great. They're good. But where do you really want testimonials? Probably on your landing page. You probably want testimonials on the places that you're going to be sending people to. Um, Content, your best stuff will be found that day. And it's not exactly going to live on the platform forever. Yeah, you could do that in your featured section, but I personally think you're wasting real estate. So your featured
okay,
section really needs to be geared towards pointing people to where you want them to go for your product or service or an appointment or whatever it might be. So great question. I would not put testimonials in there, and I would not put
got it.
content in there.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you.
Cool. So, does anyone want to learn a little bit more about content? Because I'd be happy to share it. All right, cool. So, I'm going to stop the share and just get into, what I think are important elements of really good content. Whether it's video, carousels, I don't care. Okay. Um, I happen to have a format that I believe in that I call HSSRC. Okay. And you'll get to see that obviously on the replay of this video, but that stands for hook, story, solution, result, CTA. Okay. HSSRC. So I'm going to take you through those 5 lines. A hook is something that is going to draw someone in, right? What does that mean? It means you're going to have something that's usually one line, 4 to 8 words, whatever it might be, that it has to do one thing and one thing only: elicit emotion. That is what a hook does. Okay, whether you like it or not, if you are on LinkedIn or any other social media platform, you are copywriting. You're not writing journalistic stuff here. You're not writing 10-page articles or white papers, okay? You are writing emotionally inducing content that connects to readers. So the best way to do that is to land them with a good hook, okay? So saying something like, I spent 20 years in the automotive industry. Yeah, that's fine. But it's a little bit different if you said, I spent 20 miserable years in the automotive industry, right? Like that's an emotion that connects with somebody, right? Um, you know, the worst 3 days of my life were, you know, you really want to, connect with that reader. Now, let me also give you another pointer about hooks. Don't lie and don't clickbait. That's another important thing. If you become known as a person who's basically doing sensationalistic headlines and they don't relate at all to your content, then you're just clickbaiting. And eventually people are going to catch on to that and they're not going to want to read your stuff anymore. Okay. So you better make sure that that hook, no matter how crazy it is, connects to your content. And I'm going to give you an example of one that's probably going to surprise all of you. I used a hook once that said, sometimes I like to pee sitting down. Okay. I literally wrote that. I'm 46 years old and I wrote that as a hook. It landed me on LinkedIn Lunatics on Reddit. Whatever. Shit happens. I'll tell you why I wrote that hook. One, to induce a lot of attention. Two, to connect to men who are over 40. Three, to actually prove a point. If you actually read that article, which by the way I've deleted, but if you actually read that piece, you will see that the reason I wrote that is because it actually served me a purpose. That when you go into the bathroom, it's dark, you don't want to stand up, turn on the lights, you're already in the midst of kind of sleeping. I'm talking about when you have to wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, right? And instead, I sit down. It's safer. I'm still kind of sleepy, and I go back to bed and I just fall asleep. And then I actually wrote it out like, hey, that saves me an additional 15 minutes today, and then it's an hour a week, and I get an extra hour of sleep, and da 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 da. And people were like blown away that I actually did like a scientific thing that connected to this ridiculous hook. I'm not telling you guys to do crazy hooks. What I'm telling you to do is make sure that those hooks actually connect. Okay. Now, after the hook, what do you get into? You get into the story, right? The story is setting the stage, the mood, the actual experience that you were in or someone you know was in. You can be doing case studies, doesn't matter, right? So it's really like, a couple of years ago, our company was not meeting, our deadlines, and as a result of this, three people were fired. And right? You're really setting the stage for what was going on. And you're basically explaining the pain, what was going on, what was wrong, right? And eventually, what do you want to have? Another S, a solution, right? So as a result, we decided to have a discovery call with Nat Berman, who was a coach on personal branding and da 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 da. And he explained to us that this is exactly how we were going to improve our whatever, our bottom line, right? That's your solution. You're explaining what that solution was. And then a result. As a result, 3 months later, we were able to make the right hires. Our, revenue improved. Our morale got better. Whatever it is, there's your result. That's what you want to see happen, right? The goal was met. And then finally, a CTA. Do you have to have a CTA on every single post? Call to action? No, you do not. But you could say something like, and this is precisely what I do for clients. If you're interested, drop me a DM, or you can be specific. DM me services and we'll have a discussion, or check out my link in the comments, or check out my newsletter for more information. If you're interested in finding out 10 steps as to how I can do this for you, just drop me a comment and I'll send you, the materials. Whatever it is, right? So that's basically a quick format that I think tends to work on content. Can you do personal content? Of course. Can you do other kinds of content? Of course. When it comes to formatting, there's a million things you can do. You can do video, you can do carousels, you can do those annoying freaking poster boards or in front of the cities and all that crap. Everybody has their own style, everybody has their own way. I tend to like to do selfies and text only because I wear a million different t-shirts. That's kind of my calling card. But what's your calling card? Who are you known as? Right? It's not necessarily a persona, but it's kind of like, hey, your character. Like this is the person who, right? And that's what you want to develop on this platform. Lastly, let's go over engagement a little bit, okay? You're not going to grow your account. You're not going to build relationships without engagement, okay? I used to be an engagement machine. I probably did 500 to 600 comments a day. No AI, none of that. That is not a flex. That's psychotic. Okay. But it got me pretty far as growing my account. Right. So it helped quite a bit. These days, you can't even do more than 100 outbound comments. Otherwise, you'll get stopped by LinkedIn, literally. They have a limit now. So you really want to start off slow and well. Who do you comment on? Well, you respond to all comments on your posts, but you also comment on two other types of people. One, your ICP, ideal client profile, the people you want to be building relationships with and doing business with. Those are the folks you're going to be commenting on. How do you find them? I'm not going to tell you. That's something that I do in my community. But there are 5 different ways in which I source all my leads. Okay. And then who else are you commenting on? People you like, people who are active, people who can probably help grow your account. I'm not sitting here saying find the top 100 influencers and post on their stuff and get in early in the comments. Okay, if you want to do that and really make an impact, start with like 2 people and maybe write good comments for them. And I'm not talking about nice posts, great stats. You look great. Like, no. If that's the first time you're talking to someone, do something meaningful. Write something interesting, thought-provoking. Okay? Another good way to find people is in their comments. If you're focusing on your own ICP and you notice that they have a pretty good account, how can you find other people to relate to? Well, in their comments, right? That's a little sneak preview. But anyway, so that's basically a real quick thing on engagement. And another thing you should be doing is connecting. I unfortunately don't have a ton of connections left. I think I have like 4,000, which it's actually plenty, but it's still not a lot compared to, what probably most of you have. If you are not hitting that connect button 25 times a day, you're wasting your time. Like, there's no reason you shouldn't. And there's a lot of debates as to whether or not you send a message along with your connection request. That's optional. Statistics actually show that it's pretty equal whether you send one or not. And I'll tell you the reason. The first thing someone's going to do when they see your connection request is what? They're going to look at your profile and they're going to decide right then and there whether or not they're going to connect with you. Most likely. Will a message get you over the top? It might. It might. But typically, I'll reserve messages for people who I was referred to. Well, I'll say, so and so referred me over to you. I think we should connect and blah, blah, blah. And then the real engagement game is after that connection is made and starting conversations with them, stuff that we're not going over today, which you can find in my community, by the way, at the low, low price of, okay. So that's basically a real quick tutorial on engagement. Make sure you reply to everybody, treat them how you want to be treated, right? Don't just post great posts. I tend to avoid AI with comments. I'm not saying you have to avoid it. I'll even use it on occasion if I really want to post like a banger comment on someone I've never commented on before. I might use ChatGPT saying, here's this post. I want to post a great comment, give me, 50 words or something, and I'll then make it my own. That's a good use of AI when it comes to commenting. But if you're just mass commenting, you guys all know what that shit looks like. It's awful. I do not recommend that. And the best way to think about it is this: 1 person a day. That's it. You're looking to build a good relationship with one good person every day. You do that, watch what happens in a year. Okay. So, cheap pitch time. Anyway, if you guys are interested in learning more, obviously, I do have a community. It's called Brand Built. There's 200 members. We talk every single week, all about business growth, all about branding growth. I do monthly calls. My business partner does monthly calls. Our Wednesday calls are basically our community chat calls where there's open questions and everybody's learning from each other. There is a forum inside. You can get to know everybody. This is a custom community. We built it on GHL ourselves. Kind of looks a lot like school. So I'll provide the link for that. And obviously, you're probably going to get it in an email. So if you want to talk about that, feel free to email me because I would love to chat about it. I'm actually going to put my email in here right now. And you guys probably have my personal email also. That community is right here. We also have services where we do it done for you. So we do ghostwriting as well for founders and executives who don't necessarily have the time. So that's also an option if you want to email me about that. That's my whole pitch, guys. Told you I wouldn't be bombarding you with all this crap. If you want to learn more about that stuff, just contact me. Very simple.